Welcome back to Round the Cauldron, where we talk theology, philosophy, and everyday life as a modern witch. Follow the show on social media, subscribe to the newsletter, and watch the show live on YouTube. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to help other witches find me. Don't forget, you can help support the show at patreon.com/roundthecauldron for as little as $1 a month and get patron-exclusive content. If you're ready to hop into the show, grab some coffee, pull up a seat, and join me round the cauldron. So today, let's see. Oh, I do have announcements. So for podcast listeners, don't forget that you can now watch the live stream of the podcast recording if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you're here and you're watching and you're not subscribed, you should be. Make sure that you click the little bell so that you can be notified when I go live and when I post new videos. Also, Round the Cauldron podcast turns 1 next month. 1 whole year of podcasting. So I'm gonna do some sort of giveaway. I haven't decided exactly what I'm gonna do yet or when, but keep an eye out for that. Make sure that you're following me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All the links are in the description and in the show notes. So do that. And yeah, also, if you want to help support the show and you enjoy the content, the blog, the videos, the podcast, whatever it is that you partake in, you can help support the show on Patreon if you have $1 to spare a month. Patreon.com/roundthecauldron. If you don't want to join me on Patreon, you can also donate via PayPal, or you can donate via coffee or Ko-fi or whatever it's called, for the price of a coffee. So that's all of that. I think all of those announcements are over. Let me open this back up here and we can get started into the topic. So content warning, I guess before we hop into it, I will be talking a little bit about purity culture and sex and how different cultures and religions and stuff view women. So that is your content warning. Nothing graphic, nothing in detail, but I do know that some people aren't comfortable with those topics, so that is your content warning. Now, why did I choose to talk about this? Because of T.I. The rapper T.I. So I heard about this last week, and if you haven't heard, I'll put some links in the description and the show notes to some articles, but this rapper T.I., he has an 18-year-old daughter, and he was interviewed on a podcast that has now been deleted, saying that he goes with his daughter, who is now 18 years old as of the recording and as of today, goes with his daughter every year to the gynecologist to check her hymen to make sure that she is still a virgin. There's so much wrong with that, and I don't want to react to that specifically, but I do want to talk about the subject in general and how it relates back to culture and the modern world. By the way, checking your hymen is not an indicator of virginity, and virginity is a made-up, stupid concept. So now that that's out of the way, I want to talk about how Wiccans view sex, how Christians view sex, what purity culture is, and then I want to rewind as far back as I could go on how the ancient Celtic people viewed sex, women, and purity. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I've been researching this because I posted that people need to cite their sources. That's one of the hardest things about going back and doing research, especially on this era and this age, because there's not a lot of documentation available, and what is available is from secondary sources or people who were observing and not actively partaking in the culture. So, um, going through that, um, keep in mind that everything here is either my opinion or it is backed up by research or it is purely speculation because, again, a lack of sources. But all the sources that I use are going to be in the description and in the show notes, and I will let you know if something is my opinion or if it is backed up by fact. So, first, let's unpack what purity culture is because it's a loaded concept that, in my opinion, stems from Christianity and monotheistic religions. Purity culture is the idea that a woman or person with a vagina, I'm going to use the term woman here just for ease. Um, Purity culture is that the idea that a woman must be pure and untouched before marriage and she must save herself for her husband. Um, and that's it. So well, I guess that's really a basic way of defining it. But within purity culture, the woman must be a virgin, she must be untouched, and she has to save herself for marriage, and she basically becomes the property of her husband. Um, and the people who buy into this purity culture believe that a woman has no value if she is impure. And there's a lot wrong with that. And that's why I think that plays a lot into what T.I. does with his daughter and checking her hymen to make sure that she is pure for her future husband or whatever reason he does it for. It's like he doesn't see that a woman has value if she has already had sex. And that, in my opinion, does stem from Christianity and from monotheistic religions, where there is a heavy influence placed on patriarchy and the man being in charge and the woman being submissive and really less than her husband in this case. And purity culture does stem a lot from very heteronormative relationships. As far as I know, there's not purity culture in any other relationship because, again, it stems from Christianity, and most Christianity or most Abrahamic faiths, they say that marriage is between a man and a woman and sexual relations should also be between a man and a woman. So I don't see it outside of heteronormative relationships. Um, but outside of Christianity, I don't think that purity culture is really a thing. It's just within the scope of Christianity. And within Wicca, there is no purity culture. There is no hard and fast law or rule that says you can't have sex before you're married. Um, and oh, before I go any further, I do want to say that all of this applies to everybody that is over the age of majority, wherever you live, and everything happens with consent of all parties involved, and that should go without saying, but that's the disclaimer there. Um, yeah, Wiccans, as far as I know, Wiccans don't put any stock in purity culture and in being a virgin and being untouched. And there's a whole double standard to purity culture that doesn't exist outside of Christianity and mainstream faith or culture. And that double standard is the woman has to be pure, but what about the man? You know, there's not a lot of emphasis placed on a man's purity, and I think that has a lot to do with purity culture in general and the fact that women are seen as less than in purity culture. Um, so, since my particular faith is that of the Celtic pagan branch, I wanted to dive into how the ancient Celtic people saw women and marriage and sex really before Christianity came into play. I have, I don't know, like 10 different tabs open on another window. Um, I have a whole slew of notes here. So let's hop into that. Um, so again, like I said, I chose the Celtic culture because that's where my ancestors are from. That's the branch of paganism that I ascribe to. So that's why I chose looking into how the ancient Celtic people viewed women, sex, feminism, purity, all of that. Um, and I also want to make note here, really quick, that the term Celtic is a very broad category. I mean, it spans like Ireland, Scotland, Wales, that whole area. So when I say Celtic, there's nothing really that's going to be very specific to one region. And again, that has a lot to do with the fact that there's not a lot of sources, there's not a lot of primary sources out there for those particular areas. And what we do have to go on is either secondary sources or speculation. But women in the ancient Celtic times, and I'm talking before Christianity, so before Common Era and a little bit after Common Era, um, they could be basically whatever they wanted. They could be warriors, they could be priestesses, they could be educators. There are so many different examples of women in mythology and the historic sources that I was able to find that really talk about women in these positions of not necessarily positions of power, but positions of authority. There are, let's see, I have three listed here. Two of them I can pronounce their names, the other one I can't. The first person that I have listed here is Skya. I can't pronounce it, but I'll link everything down in the description. Um, but she was from what is now Scotland, and in the mythology and the stories, she actually trained the warrior Cuchulainn, and he goes on to do some amazing feats, and he goes on to be an amazing warrior. And then you have Maeve, who is a queen of a certain area in Ireland, and then you have someone who led the last major revolt against the Romans in Britain. So, I mean, from what I can gather, it seems that the ancient Celtic people didn't have a problem with women being in positions of authority or being strong and powerful. And I think I read even some of the Roman accounts were talking about how the Celtic women were just as strong, if not stronger, than the Celtic men, and sometimes they feared for their safety around the Celtic women. Some of the Roman encounters also go on to talk about the sexual frivolity of Celtic women, and there's there's a lot of the secondary sources that go in and talk about that. But from what I can gather in all of the reading that I've done, the ancient Celtic people had no problem with a woman being in a position of authority, with a woman being an educator, or in the arts, or in some sort of strong position, such as a warrior and a leader. And I wonder why that can't translate into today. I mean, it here in the United States, it wasn't until several years ago that women were allowed to serve on the front lines for their country within the military. Just a couple years ago. I mean, it's 2019. If they could do it before Common Era, what's what why did it go away, you know? Um and then I found something too in my readings, but I couldn't find a source for it, so take it as you want. Um I'm not sure if I believe in the accuracy of what I read, but someone said that a woman actually acted as ambassador in establishing a treaty between the Carthaginian general Hannibal and the Celtic ruler of the Volcae. Again, I couldn't find a source for that, so I don't know how accurate it is. Um, and then, as far as their views on marriage, from what I can gather, the Celtic people viewed marriage as a partnership. You know, it really had no religious connotations to it at all. There was no religious reason for Celtic people to get married. They saw it as a partnership, a bringing together of two families, two um, incomes, and coming together as one to make living easier and, you know, all of the legal reasons that people would get married today. Um, and even today, I think like that. For me, there's really no religious reason for me to get married. My boyfriend and I have been together, it'll be 11 years this month. 11 years, and we're not married. And there are several reasons for that. One being we're just not. Two being all of the legal implications and financial implications of getting married would actually hurt us and not benefit us. So that's one of the main reasons I could say to him, you know, hey, let's go get married right now, and we could, you know, but there's no reason to. It would do more harm than good for us to get married right now due to the legal and financial implications of marriage as a partnership. And hand fasting actually comes from the ancient Celtic people, and it used to be like a temporary marriage. They would get together, they would have a hand fasting, it would last for 12 months, so it would last for a whole year. And then at the end of it, they would decide, you know, was this beneficial? Did this work out in our favor? Um, are we good together? Do we love each other? Um, and if it was, great, they stayed together. If it wasn't, they parted their ways, and that was it. And I wish it could be like that now, that there wasn't this huge religious implication to getting married because it's, you know, if you want to get married for religion, great. But I get people telling me all the time, like, oh my gosh, you've been together for so long. Why aren't you married yet? Do I have to be married to be happy? My boyfriend and I, we have a partnership together. We live together. Our incomes are combined. We pay bills together. Nothing is in my name only or his name only. We have a freaking kid. We have a child together. None of that means that we need to be married legally because we don't. And our relationship is a partnership. And when we're ready and when our time, um, when all of our ducks are in a row that getting married will benefit us instead of harm us, then we'll probably get married. Maybe. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Um, but that's how the ancient Celtic people saw marriage as a partnership, and it had no religious implications. Um, Julius Caesar had said that men really held the power of like life or death within a relationship in the ancient Celtic peoples, but um, from what we do know, women did have a lot of freedoms and privileges for the time. And just because the men were technically in charge doesn't mean the men in the relationship saw their female partners as less than, because they might not have been. Just because the man being in charge was the cultural norm and what maybe the Romans saw, we don't know if that's how the Celtic people saw it. Because again, the Roman encounters, the Roman accounts, those are secondary sources. They're not coming from the primary source, so we can't be sure that it is 100% accurate. But according to Julius Caesar, he did say that the women in ancient Celtic society did have a lot of privileges and freedoms than their Roman counterparts. We can speculate that the women in ancient Celtic society, they could choose their own partners. They were free to own property. Um, what else do I have written down here in my notes? Um, they could choose their own husbands. They weren't forced to marry someone. I mean, I'm sure family played a role in the choosing of partners. I mean, that still happens today. If someone holds their family in high regard, they're going to consider what their family has to say about their choice of partner. Um, Women could own property. Women could file for divorce. Women could divorce their husbands. It wasn't something that had to be initiated by the husband. If the woman was done and she wanted a divorce, she was free to leave. There was also no stigma placed on a divorced woman. She was free to remarry, and she wasn't looked down upon for leaving her first or second or however many husbands she had before. Um, there's also, the Roman accounts before that sexual frivolity was a thing. Again, this is a secondary source. Um, so, we may know that the sexual frivolity was a thing in ancient Celtic society based on the Roman sources, but the Roman sources also say that it was looked down upon, and the women who engaged in the sexual frivolity were less than in society. But based on what we know about the rest of the culture and the rest of society prior to Christianity coming into play, I don't believe that sexual frivolity within the Celtic people was looked down upon because of the privileges that women were afforded. Purity wasn't a thing in the ancient Celtic world. It just wasn't. Um, that was brought into play when Christianity came into the picture. Um, there's also some sources that say the Celtic lineage was matrilineal, meaning that children would be named after the mother, and all of the women in the family were placed higher than the men. Um, I couldn't find a source for that. I couldn't find a lot of information for that. So take that however you will. Um, and then we know that um, sexual violence was something that was a crime of extreme severity. And the reason I found this out was because I worship a Celtic goddess who actually was known for helping to bring justice to those who um, did violent acts towards women in a sexual nature or not. She is a very strong goddess. She does amazing things for women and women in power, and she's a very empowering goddess. So I could talk about it forever. But that is how I came upon that little piece of knowledge. I will also have the link for that in the description. Um, so if you're watching live and you want to pop in a comment about how you feel about purity culture, you're more than welcome to. Um, Obviously, I put no stock in purity culture. I am an unwed mother. Shoot me. Um, but I did ask some people in my family, and I'm gonna speculate for some others, about how they view purity culture and sex before marriage. And I wanted to give sort of a personal account of this, I guess. So obviously I don't put stock in purity culture. Obviously I don't care about virginity. Um, a woman's worth has virginity and purity has no bearing on a woman's worth. Her sexual relationships have no bearing on a woman's worth. Um, like I said, unwed mother. My daughter is 6. I am with her father. We've been together for almost 11 years. Um, so That's my opinion. Um, I asked my mom this question and she gave me a funny look. And the reason she gave me a funny look is because on the day of her wedding to my father, she was 5 months pregnant with me. So obviously, purity culture doesn't play a role for her either. Um, I didn't get a chance to ask my dad, but he is in the same boat there. Um, I can only speculate about my grandparents. They grew up in a different time. My grandparents were born in the 40s, so take that as you will. But most of my friends and people that I know really don't put any stock in purity culture either. Um, for me, I want to say that it does have, in my opinion, what am I trying to say? I used to play stock in purity culture. Um, I grew up Christian. I did go to church. I attended Sunday school. I have been to Mormon services. I've been to Christian services. I've been to Catholic Mass. And growing up, that's something that the women are told. That you need to save yourself for marriage and you don't give that part of yourself away, and that your purity is the most important thing about you. Not your brain, not your heart, not your feelings, not your thoughts, but your purity, your virginity, your sexualness. Within those faiths, that's what you're taught as a woman is the most important thing about you. I will admit I haven't been to church in a long time. Obviously, I am a Celtic pagan. I do not ascribe to a monotheistic religion. I don't know if that has changed with any specific denominations of Christianity, but if we are going based off of most Christians' interpretations of the Bible, I would say it hasn't changed. Um, and there's a lot of that within the Bible and those faiths, that a woman's body is not her own. And you can see that in the news with what just happened with T.I. and his daughter. Because in this situation, her body was not her own. And he felt like he had to have control over it and what she does. And it's almost like being a prisoner, you know? And who knows what would have happened if he went to the gynecologist with her and she gave the gynecologist permission to tell him what was going on. What would have happened if her hymen was broken? I would hope that that physician would have explained to him that the hymen is not an indicator of sexual purity, because the hymen can be broken, gymnastics, riding a bike, playing sports. And I think this was even mentioned in the podcast, and he brushed it off and was like, she don't play sports. She doesn't do any of that. She doesn't ride a bike. And don't even get me started on the ethical implications of the physician telling TI any of this information. Um, I have a degree in health information technology. I know HIPAA like the back of my hand. And technically, it's not against HIPAA if she gave him permission. I I don't want to get into the ethics and the legality of it, because that's something completely separate. And I think that we need to move away from the purity culture as a thing. I know there are several other YouTubers who have talked about purity culture and the harm that it can do to a person and their mental health. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just, it's 2019. I don't understand why this is still a thing. Why we seem to have gone backwards, um, depending on the area that you're starting from. We seem to have gone backwards just to move forward. You know, we started as women in the ancient Celtic society, able to hold positions of power, able to own property, having a voice. And then Christianity came in and just wiped it all away. And now we're having to build from scratch. I don't understand it. I just don't. Um, yeah, I guess that's it. Let me look at my notes again, make sure that I don't have anything else to say. Yeah, I think that's it. I wish that everyone was given the equal opportunity for everything. At this point in our timeline of humans, equality is not what's needed, equity is what's needed. Things need to be equal, but opportunities also need to be equal. And that's a long road. So, but we can do it. I mean, it's not impossible. It'll be hard, but I want to move away from purity culture. I don't want to have my daughter hear from someone else that her worth is determined by her sexual purity. God help whoever tells my daughter that. I won't stand for it. Her worth is more than her sexual purity in the future. Her worth is her knowledge, her spirit, her confidence, her wisdom, her humor. Her knowledge is so much more than a stretched out piece of skin, piece of flesh. So, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you have any other views on purity culture, if you can supply sources for any other cultures that may have different um, views on purity culture and feminism and sex before marriage, I would love to hear them. You can drop them in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube, send me an email, roundthecauldron@gmail.com. Make sure you're following me on all of my social medias, and I would love to hear from you. So that is that. Make sure that you're following my social medias so that if not if, when I do decide what I'm doing for the giveaway, you will be notified and you will have a chance to enter. As always, hit the like button and subscribe if you're not, because that does help my channel in the YouTube algorithm. I am 1 subscriber away from 50 subscribers. So I would love to do that. If you can, and you have $1 to spare, go ahead and support me at Patreon, patreon.com/roundthecauldron. You get exclusive patron content or patron exclusive content. So it's worth it for just $1. Yeah. So I will talk at you guys next week and see you then. Bye.